Raymond Zondo is the last candidate to be interviewed for the post. Let's take you now to Sandton, where those interviews have been going on. Currently, a bit of a comfort break being taken by the commissioners and Zondo. Stephen Grootes is there for us. And Stephen, a lot happening in just the last hour. Take us through the questions from the likes of Commissioner Julius Malema and the others in that room.
Tembekile, good evening to you. Good to see you tonight. Well, look, no surprises that Julius Malema and the acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo would eventually get into it. On two separate fronts, and let me sort of go through them front by front rather than just simply chronologically, but Julius Malema bringing up Lindiwe Sisulu's opinion piece. The Tourism Minister, of course, appearing, we understand, before the ANC's Integrity Commission in the near future, I think tomorrow, over that piece, in which she used several words and phrases to describe the judges in South Africa. One of those phrases was mentally colonized. There is another word which was used, insinuating that certain people, certain black people, want to live in the house next to a white master. Let me go that far. Julius Malema using the phrase, using the N-word within that phrase, Tembekile, tonight, and putting it to Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo that was not an insult. He said Steve Biko used that word and that definition. Malcolm X used that word and that definition. Judge Zondo saying he disagreed. He said that it was an insult. This went back and forth for some time, the N-word flying from Malema several times during this discussion tonight. Eventually, and perhaps more assertively than he has been at any other time during this hearing, the acting chair of the Judicial Service Commission, the Deputy Judge President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Judge Kolopetse, intervening and saying that this debate is not taking the conversation any further. He said to Malema, Commissioner Malema, I will let you put the question one more time. The judge will answer the question and that will be the end of it. And Judge Zondo in the end saying that he believed it was an insult, Malema saying it was not. Then a second front opened up. Dali Mpofu, who is the advocate, of course, representing the advocates profession and Advocates for Transformation, former chair of the Economic Freedom Fighters, he asked a question slightly earlier of Judge Zondo. He said, how did it come to be that the Judge President of the Gauteng Division of the High Court, Judge Dunstan Mlambo, came to be an acting judge in the Constitutional Court? Did the Justice Minister ask for this to happen? Judge Zondo said yes. The Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, who is one of the commissioners here, did ask for this to happen. He went on to say, well, isn't this unusual? Is this the norm? Judge Zondo said it was not the norm. There's a big question here, and Malema picked this up as well with Judge Zondo, about the timeline. Was Judge Mlambo, was he actually nominated to the position of Chief Justice before or after the Justice Minister wrote this letter to Judge Zondo asking for Judge Mlambo to be an acting judge on the Constitutional Court? Malema says he wants those documents, the letters back and forth between them, to be introduced into the JSC's deliberations tomorrow. But the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, who at one point was Julius Malema's deputy leader in the ANC Youth League many years ago, in another life, he may say, then started quoting the Constitution. The Constitution spells out the role that the Justice Minister plays in liaising with the head of a court for the position of acting judge. He went through the constitutional clause, which spells this out in some detail. He then said to Judge Zondo, explain to me how you believe this is meant to work. Judge Zondo, I think, battled to stifle a chuckle at this point, Tembekile, and explained, well, it spells out the procedure. And the procedure, as I understand the constitutional clause read out by the Justice Minister there, Tembekile, is in fact that the Minister will liaise with the head of a court about the position of actually an acting judge on the court. The point being that Malema was completely misinterpreting the law and that this is how things are done. So there's been a big thunderstorm in Sandton this afternoon. That storm has passed over for now. And some of that storm, I think, has been felt, the electricity of it has been felt in the main hearings here this afternoon.
But, Stephen, another issue that we were all expecting would come up, and did indeed come up, had to do with Zondo's tenure as chairperson of the inquiry into state capture, and there were questions raised about the timing of the release of the report and how that may or may not sway this appointment in his favor.
Absolutely. This was certainly the dominant issue for much of the morning. Let me put the issue as crisply as I can and as I understand it. Essentially, the claim is, and it came from one or two people that the part of the report which the judge has still to publish and still to give to the presidency may actually concern President Cyril Ramaphosa himself. You'll know, of course, that he testified at the commission. The question then is, it is the President who decides who the Chief Justice will be after this process. But you are yet to still make findings about the President. You can hear the conflict. And of course, what Judge Zondo said, and he said this several times, was that the timing in the end became out of his control. He at first wanted to hand over the full Zondo Commission report at the end of December. He said this eventually proved to be impossible. Some people in his office wanted to say, well, let's ask for another extension. He said, we really can't do that. Let's do it in parts, and that's what has happened. He says it is the way that things are. And he said, you know, this was not what he wanted. He spoke at some length earlier about how, at the beginning, it seems it was his job to actually find a judge to chair this commission, and in the end, he said no one wanted to do it. He knew that it was going to be difficult for him and that it would pose problems for him, but he decided to do it anyway because it had to be done and a judge had to do it. And it is no surprise to me, and I think to anyone watching this process, no surprise to you either, Thembekile, that his chairing of the Zondo Commission report was going to come up very much in this process, and so it has.
And just to update people just joining us, I'm speaking to Stephen Grootes, who's live for us, anchoring from those interviews for the position of Chief Justice. We're speaking with Stephen right now because there is a comfort break that was taken a few minutes ago, and we'll take you back live there as soon as the interview of the Acting Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, resumes. But Stephen, another issue that I wanted us to pick up on had to do with the work done by Zondo as far as transformation in the courts and his views on legacy. He said that he wasn't concerned about what his legacy would be, but more about his contribution to change. Am I summing it up correctly?
Yes, Thembekile. I mean, and part of what this is about is the fact that Judge Zondo, if he is appointed to the position of Chief Justice, will only be able to hold that position for about 2 years. To be Chief Justice, you have to be on the Constitutional Court. Judges on the Constitutional Court are term limited. He's been there for about a decade, and this is the problem that they actually have. They have to get around that. And so what this means then is that, in fact, there would be a limited time by which Judge Zondo could actually be the Chief Justice. And so I think this is really pointing to that. What would your legacy be after just 2 years? How would you have transformed the court? There are all sorts of issues around all of this because at the moment there are no white people on the Constitutional Court. There are no white judges there. I think that's going to be an issue as the Judicial Service Commission continues its hearings. There is a vacancy on the Constitutional Court anyway, so I think that will come up in that issue will come up during those hearings. Other people may say, well, is that really a legitimate concern considering how long white judges have sort of dominated parts of the court, certainly out of all proportion to the country's demographics. But Judge Zondo, I think, trying to say that he knows what needs to be done in the court, how to improve it, and how to change it. And that was part of his message today.